So, you know about glue, you know about pinning, but what is green stuff? Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. I write another Back to Basics series for you, and in this video I want to have a look at green stuff. Now, bearing in mind that this series is literally for beginners, so it's going to be some basic information, but hopefully very useful information. I will put a link in the description below of other videos that I've made about green stuff, maybe some more advanced stuff. So if you're interested in that, then you can head on over and look at those after you've watched this one. Okay, let's have a look at green stuff. Okay, so quite a common question that I'm asked is, what is green stuff? So very basically, green stuff is an epoxy. It comprises of two halves, usually yellow and blue, and then when you mix them together it becomes green, like that. Let me just zoom in a bit for you. There you go. It becomes green and it's all soft and workable. And then after about 4 hours it goes hard. So you've got some working time for it. So that is what green stuff is. Now, sometimes this will come in different forms. For example, Galforce 9 do some stuff called grey stuff. It's got like a light grey and a dark grey, and then when you mix it together it becomes like a mid-tone grey. It works exactly the same, and there are many other products available. But for this video we're just going to call it green stuff because that's what Games Workshop call it. So where do you buy it from? Well, Games Workshop do sell it. It's £7 and you get 6 inches of green stuff. Yeah, if you go to Wargames you can get 18 inches for £5. If you look on eBay you can get 36 inches for £10. I can get it in the camera. It's so long I can't even get it in the camera. So it depends on how much you're using. I use a lot of green stuff, so I've got, you know, a big roll of green stuff. But yeah, basically, to be honest with you, don't go to Games Workshop and buy it. I'm a big fan of Games Workshop. You know, I love Games Workshop. I love their products. I appreciate that they're overpriced. But 6 inches for £7 is just, well, let's face it, it's ridiculous for what you can get elsewhere. So have a look around for green stuff and the price, but it's basically all the same. Okay, so how do we use green stuff? Well, I don't mean what we're going to use it for, I mean how are we going to use it. So the how is that green stuff itself is actually really sticky, and when you're working with it, especially if you're using, for example, a tool which is metal, when you start playing with it, it can really start to stick to your tool, and anything that you're doing can easily get messed up. So when you're using green stuff, what you need to do is use a little bit of water. If you put some water, just have a cup of water, dip your fingers in the water, and then when you're touching it, it doesn't stick to your fingers that much. An alternative to that, let's say I'm going to stick it onto the table here because I want to, I don't know, let's just say I'm going to sculpt something into this green stuff which looks really fantastic, and then you try and get it off of the table or off of the mat and it just sticks and it's all messed up. So what you can do is you can put down some water, yes, although in that instance I'd actually put down some olive oil. Not too much, just a little smear of olive oil, and that really does stop it from sticking on there. So I've been talking about working with the green stuff, and you saw the tool. So this is a Games Workshop tool. I use this for the majority of my green stuff work. It has like a flat and curved edge one end and almost like a knifey piece the other end. Now there's many tools. You can buy like a whole, like a toolbox of tools. Yeah, a toolbox of tools, which has got all different instruments in, of all different types. I know some people that use a toothpick, but I find this Games Workshop tool to be pretty decent. The only thing I would suggest is to go alongside that, these what we call colour shapers, also known as silicone brushes. So they're like a paint brush, but they've got a silicone tip, and these do not stick to the green stuff. And these are fantastic for shaping your green stuff, and also because they're silicone, rather than using your fingers to do stuff, you can actually shape it without leaving any fingerprints on there. So a really, really useful tool. You can pick these up for a couple of £2 from eBay. And they come in different shapes and sizes. I've got like a pointed one here. I've got about 6 different shapes in my toolbox. So that's what I use to manipulate the green stuff. But yeah, what are we going to manipulate the green stuff to? How are we actually going to use it? So I'm going to go through some stuff, some very basic stuff, going all the way up to some advanced stuff just to show you. And then I'm going to show you what other things that you can use it for, because just like pinning or the pin vise, green stuff is a really, really useful thing to have in your kit. So we're going to start off with a Space Wolf that I've got here, and I'm just going to zoom in. Hopefully you'll be able to pick this up on the camera. So if I go to the back, now you can see I've got some green stuff work just there in the shoulders, and what I've done there is I've filled in the gaps. So this arm here didn't particularly fit that well, had a bit of a gap at the back, so I filled that in with some green stuff. So green stuff is great for filling in holes, gaps, seams. You know, when sometimes you've got, say, a model and you put it together and there's a big seam going down, where you can get some green stuff and you can then just push that in, use your tools just to take any excess off. Now they do liquid green stuff, which is this one. I have to be honest, I've not really had any success with it. Even just on little seams, I find that it still leaves an indentation. I also find that the liquid green stuff very, very rapidly, very quickly goes off. Yeah, it's like crumbly stuff. I wouldn't recommend liquid green stuff. Some people maybe, they can get on with it, but I personally don't. So I would suggest you would start off quite small with green stuff, and that's what I did. So these are the very first models that I actually used green stuff, and as you can see, all I really did was fill in a few gaps. I don't know if you're going to be able to pick this up on the video, but his little sheath for his sword also has like a little strap going up to his belt, so it actually looks realistic. It doesn't look like he's just got the sheath just stuck to his leg. I've actually put a little strap on it, like so. And that's what I would do really, is I would start off with some really, really basic stuff just to get used to working with it. It isn't something to fear, it's just something to practice with. And you're better off practicing with something very small to start with, get a feel for how it works, get a feel for how you can manipulate it, and also get a feel for things like how long it dries. Sometimes you might want it to dry a bit quicker. Sorry, not quicker. Sometimes you might want to work with it before it gets really hard. And sometimes you might want to actually wait until it hardens up a bit before you use it. And that just comes with experience. So let's move on to something slightly more advanced. So I've got my, what is it, Talos? No, Chronos, isn't it? I've got my Chronos here. This is my Dark Eldar model, and it has loads of tentacles. Now all of these tentacles here I made with green stuff. And although they do move a little bit, you know, a little bit flexible, nothing really too much, and they come out really well. And all I did was got a bit of green stuff like this. I just rolled it up into a tube, and then I got my little knife and I just made some little indentations, and this is the result. pretty simple to do. Of course, there are some specialist equipment, things like tentacle makers, which I believe a company called Green Stuff Industries make, but you know, you can do everything pretty much yourself with a little bit of time and imagination. And that brings me on to full-blown sculpting. So let me just zoom out. I didn't realise how big this guy is. Okay, so this is my Necron Void Dragon. It's huge. There you go. My Necron Void Dragon, and I would say this is probably about 70% green stuff. So I've got this green stuff cloak, all of his chest is green stuff. These are actual model arms and a model head and a model leg, but everything else is all green stuffed in. His chest plate with this little lightning thing, just so I can zoom in on that. There you go, that's all green stuffed in on his chest plate. And it just shows you that, you know, anything is achievable, because I am certainly no expert sculptor by any stretch of the imagination. All I did was have a go, really. And that's what I would suggest to you, but like I said, I would start small. I wouldn't necessarily go in with a full-blown sculpt at the beginning. Now, there are other things that you can do with green stuff. Check out these Scarab swarms here. These Scarab swarms are made from green stuff. Now, I didn't sculpt them, I didn't go in my tool and sculpt them. What I did is I made a little mould cast, basically. So I got the original Scarab, used some green stuff, I pushed the Scarab in using some olive oil, pulled it out again, did the same on the other side, and then put a little ball of green stuff in the middle, and I pushed it together, let it set for a few hours, took it apart, and then I had a green stuff Scarab. Again, there will be a video on me doing that in one of my previous videos. But the point is that there's many things that you can do with green stuff and actually get some really good results. Now, I mean, that particular method that I used there is fine for something very small. There are other materials available to you for actually making moulds, especially if you're doing bigger stuff. But for small stuff like this, making your own mould is fine. So the point that I'm trying to make really is that green stuff can be as advanced or as basic as you want it, and not only is it for sculpting and for making models, it's an incredibly useful tool for other things. Let me just bring some green stuff in while I'm talking. So what else can we use it for? Okay, so it can be very useful for magnetization. Now, we are going to talk about magnetization in a separate video dedicated to it, but imagine that you drilled out a hole for a magnet to go into. If you put a small piece of green stuff into that hole and then super glue the magnets in, you get a much stronger bond for that magnet in that hole. So it's really useful for things like that. It can be very useful for helping you glue very delicate small areas. So let's just bring in this guy. So for example, if I was gluing in or gluing on that horn onto his head, I might have trouble gluing that in with some super glue. So what I can do is put a very, very tiny small ball of green stuff on the area, put some super glue on the piece that I want to glue on, and then put it into place. And that green stuff gives me an instant bond that will hold it into position whilst the glue actually dries. And I find it's very useful for that. The only note on that is make sure that the green stuff doesn't take up the whole area that you're gluing. Make sure that there's still metal to metal, plastic to plastic, as well as the green stuff. But it is really, really useful for helping you glue tricky items. So other things, you can use green stuff for your bases, actually bringing this guy back in. And if you have a look here at his base, these little crystals, they're made from green stuff. Literally rolled up a tube of green stuff, and then I used my knife and I cut out the shape. Again, I've got a tutorial on that. I'll put a link to that in the description. And of course you can make anything for the bases that you want. You can make rocks, or you could put a load of green stuff on there and use another item. Actually push that item into the green stuff to give you a texture, maybe some cobblestone materials or something. Really, really useful. The imagination for green stuff is the only thing that's stopping you from doing really cool stuff. Let's have a look on my notes, just see if there's anything else I wanted to say. Yeah, the last thing is pinning. We talked about pinning in the last video, but actually green stuff is also quite useful when you're pinning, because what you can do is drill out your hole for your paperclip to go into. Now sometimes you might drill that hole a bit big, possibly, and bigger than your paperclip. And a bit like the magnets, you can get a bit of green stuff and you can put a tiny bit of green stuff in that hole before you superglue the paperclip in, and that will make that bond much stronger. Occasionally, on a very small occasions, but occasionally I've been drilling out, let's just say I've been drilling out an arm, and I've gone in with my pin vise and I've drilled all the way through, and I've accidentally drilled all the way through to the shoulder pad, where you can get a piece of green stuff and then you can fill that hole with some green stuff and cover up your mistake. So green stuff, very, very useful. A scary product potentially, but all I can say really is just do it, just go for it. Don't be scared. Don't be disappointed with your first results, especially if you're attempting to actually physically sculpt something, because obviously that is going to take some skill, it is going to take some practice, but as long as you start with some basic stuff, then you will see yourself improve and improve the more and more that you do. So it's just practice makes perfect. Okay, so that's it for this video. I really, really hope it was useful. Thanks for watching as always, and watch out for the next one.